Ganapati Sastri, or Ganapati Muni. Altogether outstanding among the devotees was Ganapati Sastri, also known as Ganapati Muni, or the sage Ganapati, and given the honorific title of Kavyakanta, one whose speech is poetry, for his preeminence in Sanskrit extemporaneous verse disputation. He was a man of towering ability that would have placed him in the very forefront of modern writers and scholars had he had the ambition, and that would have made him a great spiritual master had he totally lacked ambition. But somehow he fell between the two. Too much turned to God to seek success or fame. He was nevertheless too anxious to aid and uplift mankind to escape totally from the I am the doer illusion. At the time of his birth in 1878, 1 year before that of Sri Bhagavan, his father was in Benares before an image of the god Ganapati, and beheld a vision of a child running up to him from God. Therefore he named his child Ganapati. For the first 5 years of his life, Ganapati was dumb and subject to epileptic fits, and seemed anything but a promising child. Then he was cured, it seems, by branding with a red-hot iron, and immediately began to display his marvelous ability. By the age of 10, he had written Sanskrit verse and prepared an astrological almanac, besides mastering several Sanskrit works and grammars. At 14, he had mastered the Panchakavyas and the chief books on Sanskrit prosody and rhetoric, and read the Ramayana and Mahabharata and some of the Puranas. He could already speak and write fluent Sanskrit. Like Sri Bhagavan, he had a phenomenal memory. Whenever he read or heard, he remembered. Again, just like Sri Bhagavan. And he had the ability of Ashta-avanda, that is, of giving his attention to a number of different things at the same time. The stories of the ancient rishis fired him with emulation, and from the age of 18, shortly after his marriage, he began traveling about India, visiting sacred places, repeating mantras, and performing tapas, or asceticism and austerities. In 1900, he attended a meeting of Sanskrit pundits at Nadia in Bengal, where his extraordinary facility in impromptu versification and brilliant philosophic disputation won him the title of Kavyakanta. In 1903, he came to Tiruvannamalai and twice visited Brahmana Swami, as Ramana was known at the time, on the hill. For a while, he took a job as schoolteacher in Vellore, a few hours' railway journey from Tiruvannamalai. There he gathered round him a group of disciples who were to develop their Shakti, or power and energy, by the use of mantras, to such an extent that the subtle influence would permeate and uplift the whole nation, if not all mankind. The life of a teacher could not hold him for long. By 1907, he was back again in Tiruvannamalai, but by now doubts began to oppress him. He was approaching middle age, and with all his brilliance and vast learning, and all his mantras and tapas, he had not attained success at yet either with fully liberation in God or in the world. He felt that he had come to a dead end. On the 9th day of the Kartikai festival, he suddenly remembered the Swami on the hill. Surely he must have the answer. As soon as the impulse came, he acted on it. In the heat of the afternoon sun, he climbed the hill to Virupaksha cave. The Swami was sitting alone on the veranda of the cave. Sastri fell on his face before him and clasped his feet with outstretched hands. In a voice quivering with emotion, he said, "All that has to be read, I have read. Even Vedanta Sastra I have fully understood. I have performed japa, invocation and mantra to my heart's content. Yet I have not up to this time understood what tapas is. Therefore I have sought refuge at your feet. Pray enlighten me as to the nature of tapas." The Swami turned his silent gaze upon him for some 15 minutes, and then replied, "If one watches whence the notion I arises, the mind is absorbed into that. That is tapas. When a mantra is repeated, if one watches the source from which the mantra sound is produced, the mind is absorbed in that. That is tapas." It was not so much the words spoken that filled him with joy as the grace and pure silence radiating from the Swami. With the exuberant vitality they put into everything, he wrote to friends of the instruction and initiation he had received and began composing praises of the Swami in Sanskrit verse. He learned from Palani Swami that the Swami's name had been Venkataramana, and declared that henceforth he must be known as Bhagavan Sri Ramana and as the Maharshi. The name Ramana immediately came into use. So also did the title Maharshi or Maharishi, the great Rishi. It long remained customary to refer to him in speech and writings as the Maharshi. However, the practice gradually prevailed among the devotees of addressing him in the third person simply as Bhagavan, which means the divine, or simply God, or the Lord. He himself usually spoke impersonally, avoiding the use of the word I. For instance, Bhagavan did not actually say, "I did not know when the sun rose or when it set," but "Who knew when the sun rose or when it set?" Sometimes also he referred to his body as this. Only in making a statement in which the word God would be appropriate did he say Bhagavan and speak in the third person. For instance, when my daughter was going back to school and he was asked to remember her while she was away, the reply was, "If Kitty remembers Bhagavan, Bhagavan will remember Kitty." Ganapati Sastri also liked to refer to Sri Bhagavan as a manifestation of the God Supramenam. However, in this, the devotees rightly refused to follow him, feeling that to regard Sri Bhagavan as a manifestation of any one divine aspect was to attempt to limit the illimitable. Nor did Sri Bhagavan countenance the identification. A visitor once said to him, "If Bhagavan is an avatar of Subramaniam, as some people say, why does he not tell us openly instead of leaving us to guess?" And Bhagavan replied, "What is an avatar? An avatar is only a manifestation of one aspect of God, whereas a yoni is God himself." About a year after his meeting with Sri Bhagavan, Ganapati Sastri experienced a remarkable outflow of his grace. While he was sitting in meditation in the temple of Ganapati in Tiruvallur, he felt distracted and longed intensely for the presence and guidance of Sri Bhagavan. At that moment, Sri Bhagavan entered the temple. Ganapati Sastri prostrated himself before him, and as he was about to rise, he felt Sri Bhagavan's hand upon his head and a terrifically vital force coursing through his body from the touch, so that he also received grace by touch from the Master. Speaking about this incident in later years, Sri Bhagavan said, "One day, some years ago, I was lying down and awake when I distinctly felt my body rise higher and higher. I could see the physical objects below growing smaller and smaller till they disappeared, and all around me was a limitless expanse of dazzling light. After some time I felt the body slowly descend, and the physical objects below began to appear. I was so fully aware of this incident that I finally concluded that it must be by such means that siddhas, the sages with spiritual powers, travel over vast distances in a short time and appear and disappear in such a mysterious manner. While the body thus descended to the ground, it occurred to me that I was in Tiruvithur, though I had never seen the place before. I found myself on a high road and walked along it. At some distance from the roadside was a temple of Ganapati, and I entered it. This incident is very characteristic of Sri Bhagavan. It is characteristic that the distress or devotion of one of his devotees should call forth an involuntary response and intervention in form that can only be called miraculous. And it is also characteristic that Sri Bhagavan, with all powers at his feet, should be no more interested to use powers of the subtle than of the physical world. And when some such things happen in response to the appeal of a devotee, should say with the simplicity of a child, "I suppose that is what siddhas do." It was just this indifference that Ganapati Sastri failed to attain. He asked once, "Is seeking the source of the I-thought sufficient for the attainment of all my aims, or is incantation needed?" Always the same, his aims, his ambitions, the regeneration of the country, the revitalization of religion. Sri Bhagavan replied curtly, "The former will suffice." And when Sastri continued about his aims and ideals, Bhagavan added, "It will be better if you throw the entire burden on the Lord. You will carry all the burdens, and you will be free from them. He will do his part." In 1917, Ganapati Sastri and other devotees put a number of questions to Sri Bhagavan, and the questions and answers have been recorded in a book entitled Sri Ramana Gita, more erudite and doctrinal than most of the books. Characteristically, one of the questions that Ganapati Sastri asked was whether someone who attained jnana, or self-realization, as it were, by the way, while seeking some specific powers, would find his original desires fulfilled. And nowhere is Sri Bhagavan's swift and subtle humor better illustrated than in the reply he gave. If the yogi, though starting upon yoga for the fulfillment of his desires, gained knowledge in the meantime, he would not be unduly elated, even though his desires were likewise fulfilled. About 1936, Ganapati Sastri settled down in the village of Nimpura near Karangpur with a group of followers, and from then until his death some 2 years later, devoted himself wholly to tapas. Sri Bhagavan was asked once, after the Sastri's death, whether he could have attained realization during this life, and he replied, "How could he? His sankalpas, inherent tendencies, were too strong."